Great. Thanks so much, Kristen. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kylie. I'm the director of the Women's Foundation of Montana. We're a statewide foundation dedicated to advancing economic security of women and girls. Our work blends grant making, advocacy, and community partnerships to meet the immediate needs of women and girls, to help create financial stability, and to invest in the development of powerful leaders in our state. So thanks for joining us today during Native American Heritage Month, which is a time not only to honor the long history of Indigenous peoples in this place, but to recognize the strength and the creativity and the vibrant leadership of Indigenous communities today. We are joined by three remarkable leaders today for our conversation. Amy Stiffarm, Director of Native American Initiatives at Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies, the Montana Coalition. Lynette, Executive Director and Founder of Yellowbird Lifeway Center, and Angie Main, Director of NACDC Financial Services, who is joining us from the road. Thanks, Angie, for doing that today. Each of our leaders that are speaking today bring such deep experience and expertise in community health, in economic development, and in cultural revitalization and food sovereignty. And the reason why this conversation matters today and truly every day is that Indigenous women are leading some of the most innovative and community-rooted work right now. The Women's Foundation is honored to be able to support some of that work in Montana. So we'll hear today from Angie about reshaping the finance industry to adopt practices of trust and reciprocity. We'll hear from Lynette today about work that is strengthening families and creating opportunities for healing through food sovereignty. And we'll hear from Amy about work that's honoring the sacred ceremony of birth by strengthening the network of Indigenous birth workers in this state. And of course, their work actually extends beyond state boundaries. It's regional, it's national, it's multinational, really touching Indigenous communities far outside of the state boundaries. And yet, just to give a little bit of framing to this, philanthropic giving tells us another story. Philanthropic giving to Native American communities and causes is less than 0.5% of all philanthropic dollars. And I think it's important to know that even less reaches organizations that are directly led by Indigenous communities. So the 0.5% represents funds that go to entities that might work with Indigenous communities, but those institutions are not necessarily controlled by or accountable to Indigenous communities. So the resource gap of philanthropic dollars going directly to communities is real. And it's really been established among a history of settler colonialism, displacement, and systems that really extracted from Indigenous communities rather than investing in them. And in spite of all that, we still see Indigenous women leading profoundly meaningful and effective work, addressing the basic needs of their communities and creating spaces for healing and for creativity, and building systems that really honor tradition and maintain sovereignty and advance economic opportunity. And so today's discussion is going to help us all learn and connect so that we can be more thoughtful about how we support Indigenous women leaders in Montana through philanthropy and hopefully beyond philanthropy. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator and panelist, Amy Stiffarm. So Amy, thank you for leading us into this conversation.
So much, Kylie. This is just an honor and very excited to be here and just to be able to talk to not just other Indigenous women doing this work, but people who have been doing amazing work. And I feel like I'm excited to learn from you all too. And we kind of have some basic topics and issues that we want to hit on. And I'm going to try to not squirrel and around and pop off on an interesting thing that you guys say, but this should be a lot of fun. So thanks everybody for joining us. Um, One of the first topics that we thought would be really interesting to talk about is just kind of our leadership models and what we've seen, and how they've influenced our work. So, and would love to have other people chime in, especially Indigenous leaders. There's a lot already in the participants. I've seen your names, and so let's go ahead and just start out with some basic introductions. So we'll start with Lynette. If you want to tell us, your affiliation, where you're from, your role in your organization, and just kind of some basic introduction on what your organization does and the population you're serving. Oh, you're on mute. I do that all the time.
Hihani washte, chante washte nape chizapi, duenya kiapi mia. Good morning, relatives, or I guess it's good afternoon. My name is Lynette Tubols. I am Oglala Lakota. I'm also Northern Cheyenne, and I currently am the executive director and one of the co-founders of Yellowbird Lifeway Center. We've been operating programming in the Northern Cheyenne community for, 26 years. And we do a lot of different things. We work right now, one of our biggest programs is food sovereignty and food security. And that's a real big issue right now. And we've been doing it, way before it was even called food sovereignty. It's just part of a way of life. Some of the other programs that we operate are healing, health, and wellness, our youth leadership, traditional storytelling, art, and culture, and also emergency response. So when there's things happening in our community, we're positioned to just step in and to, help the community in different ways they might need it. So for example, like during the pandemic, we did a lot of food distribution, making medicines from, the medicines that are on the land. And so we're positioned to do all of that. Yeah. I'm real honored to be here and to be able to share. And I like to say, sharing, because I feel, the older you get, the more you realize the less you know. And so, I'm always open to learning and to growing and to healing, but also to sharing my knowledge and the lessons that I've learned in my life. So thank you.
Love that. Angie, would you like to share?
Yes. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm in my car and I apologize. This wasn't on my calendar. I getting to the age I think where I started getting forgetful. So anyway, but again, my name is Angie Main. I'm an enrolled member of the Grovant tribe at Fort Belknap. I'm executive director of NACDC Financial Services. We're located on the Blackfeet Reservation, but our service area is Native Americans throughout Montana. I worked for Eloise Cabell in 2006, and I was her small business coordinator, and we'd been doing a lot of business technical assistance. And she said, Angie, we need a loan fund to complement all the technical assistance that we've been providing. So I and my coworker, Patty Gobert, she told Patty, you do all of the documents, internal documents, and Angie, you go find the money. And so we started lending in 2011, but unfortunately she passed away a week before our first loan, actually. And so she never really got to see the organization come to fruition. But yeah, we started out small, growing small business and credit builder lending. And then we moved on to ag, and then we have a native artist line of credit. And in 2017, we added home loans. And so since that time, with all of our loan portfolio, I think I know that we've lent over 30 million into Montana, Indian country. So yeah, we provide loans across the state, urban, reservation. The majority of our loans are on trust land, and so we have, the mortgage experience of having loans on trust land. So yeah, so I thank you, and thank you, Kylie, Amy, for letting me participate. Anytime I can talk about our organization is always a great day. So thank you.
For sure. I feel like we're already hearing about how like interconnected our work is, right? Like we can kind of have like a goal of focusing on one thing, but it's all so connected for us as Indigenous people. And I think that really shows through in the work that we do. And before I move on, I didn't really give too much of an introduction. Should probably say that I'm too enrolled for Belknap, the Gros Ventre tribe. I'm also a descendant of the Chippewa Cree and Blackfeet tribe. I grew up in Harlem, but I live in Helena now, so I'm like a newish urban Indian, which feels worth saying. I feel like, and I work at Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies, and we're a statewide nonprofit, and I get to run the Native American initiatives where we focus on working with Native populations and serving Native families. So we do more programmatic support, and in my work, I get to work a lot with people providing care and doing services in Native communities, whether that be through programs that they have, like WIC or whatnot, or else through someone who is serving families as Indigenous doulas. And so I kind of have a lot of different things in my work too. So happy to be here. And we kind of started talking about it, especially you, Angie, you were talking about working with Eloise Cabell. And I'm just curious, like, I think it's important to acknowledge, I mean, we always do, right, about the people who came before us and how we're able to do the work we do and be in these spaces. We know that it took work to get here. And so I'm just curious to learn from you all, what kind of leadership did you see growing up, and who did you learn from, and does that, and if so, like, how does that inspire the work that you do today? So maybe we'll go ahead, Angie, since you were kind of starting to go there, we'll start with you.
Okay, I started my career, I guess, in economic development at the Tribal College at Fort Belknap, and I've always worked for women. And then I worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the credit department, and so I've always worked for women, and so all of my role models, throughout my entire career have been women, with the latest course being one of the greatest, Eloise Cabell. And, everybody always asks me, well, you've got some big shoes to fill, how are you how are you gonna do that? And I was like, well, she's had a vision, she had a vision. And so we're, able to, I guess, help her vision come to fruition as we move along, because we still have a lot of her programs, that she started. We still do the Blackfeet Mini Bank program, the Native Artist. We still have a annual art show for the Native Artists. But I really think that, working for these women, I think made me strong, because they're such strong leaders in their own communities, and actually, they just had a lot of self-confidence, which I think was really important, because when, the 85%, I think, of our loan portfolio are women, and we provide a lot of training, technical assistance, and counseling for finance to women. And when you see them come in and, they're lacking self-confidence, they don't have a whole lot of trust. And so you really have to start working with them, from the ground up. And so I think that probably, and then you can see too their confidence grow as they, improve their credit. They're able to get a loan, because a lot of them aren't able to get even a car loan. But as soon as you're able to clear their credit or improve their credit, all of a sudden they can get a car, and they're just so thankful. I mean, my job, I see a lot of emotion. I see a lot of gratefulness, and I think that's probably why I love my job. And I've always worked, in Native American communities with Native Americans. So it's always been my passion. And so I think that um, I think when you think of young women coming up these days, and the fact that, I wish there was, more things that really help them to improve uh, their self-confidence levels, and their trust, because money is such an emotional issue, and it affects, not only women, men too. But um, and and so I think that, yeah, the strength and the self-confidence has a lot to do with building young women up these days. So
I love that. Yeah, like finances and that security and just having that baseline. And I think, yeah, I love to see it. That's awesome. What about you, Lynette? What kind of leadership did you see growing up, and how does that influence the work you're doing today? Oh, sorry, I didn't catch you soon enough. You're on mute again.
Sorry. I keep doing that. Yeah, I was fortunate to have been raised by elders, my grandparents, the late Matthew and Nellie Two Bulls. They're both gone now, but when you're raised by elders, it really it's different. It sets your mindset and who you are on this trajectory of serving the people. And that's really what I was taught from a very young age. Um, my grandfather, he used to always quote Crazy Horse, and he would say, and he would quote Crazy Horse, but he would also quote Chief Sitting Bull. And one of Sitting Bull's well-known quotes is, "Let us put our minds together to see what future we could make for our children." And so that was really the mindset that was instilled in me since I was small, and my grandparents would always say, whatever you do, Takoja, that's grandchild, do it for the people, serve the people, help the people. And my grandmother, she comes from a chief, so I come from a chief's family. And a chief is not how society, the linear society would look as a chief as at the top of a pyramid power structure, but a chief is at the bottom. And they're at the bottom because they uplift their people, they serve their people, they encourage their people forward. And so, those are the teachings that I grew up with, and that, I needed to help my people, and to be humble, and to be generous, all of the values that are in our culture. And so those are the values that, I was raised with, and that really set me on the path of, all the things that I've done in my own life, from being, I was just telling Kylie, I was in the investment industry years ago too. I was a financial consultant for some of the leading investment firms, and this was a time when the tribes were just getting into Indian gaming. And so I helped them manage their money, and I traveled, all over the country, just doing investment training and helping them create investment policies and from growing Lakota Times, which was a regional newspaper, to Indian Country Today, which was a national newspaper now. And then, starting this work from just an idea to growing it to where we are today. And that's the same thing, same philosophy that I share with my children. And I'm fortunate to have 4 daughters. And my oldest, Crystal Tubal, she's a director of Honor the Earth. And they're doing, amazing, great things out there. The next daughter is she works in accounting, so she's a finance director. My other daughter, she's kind of learning all the ropes. She works with me here at Yellowbird. And my youngest daughter just graduated, and she's a filmmaker. And so she actually yesterday was at a awards, the Red Nation International Film Festival, where one of her senior film was nominated in the Best Short Documentary category. And so she was just over in Los Angeles there at so leadership is really, and I'm not sharing that from a like from ego, but I'm sharing that because it's really connected to a whole way of life. And the teachings that were taught to me, I share that with my children. And so I feel that leadership is not, it's not in a box where you're at the top, but leadership is you're serving the people from the ground up, from the back forward. And that's nature. We're all part of nature. And if you look at all the animal nations, that's how they operate. It's all in an ecosystem, and they're all connected at a deep level. And you see how they all have to work together to make things happen. And that's kind of how I operate, as a team, whether I'm running this organization or with my family or with everybody has a voice and a gift to contribute to the circle of life. Yeah, so.
Oh, that's awesome. And I love that you brought up your daughters and just kind of how I think they get to learn from the elders too, because of what you learned from them. And yeah, this is a beautiful cycle. I think for myself, like and I would love to hear in the chat too, if anybody has any examples or stories about who they learned from, any powerful Indigenous women in their lives that showed them leadership. And I think for me, like when I was a kid, I didn't realize that it was like leadership stuff. I just thought like this is what you did and this is what everybody does. And I think it comes from, like being in a Native community where everybody is just there for each other. And so there were a lot of things that now that I'm older and now that I have kids, I'm looking back and being like, oh, wow, like that was actually unique. Even just, I think, my mom, Barb Stiffarm, who is on today, shout out to you, Mom. Like my mom and dad, when they would go places to conferences and whatnot, we'd get to go with them sometimes. Like I call them conference vacations. But I think now that when I first started going to conferences like in undergrad, I didn't feel as scared, and I just felt like I belonged, and I felt like whether it was intentional or not, I think that's one thing of like they made it so they were showing me that like we belong here. Like we might be only 1 or 2 tables of Indians, but we belong here. And then other times, oh, we're gonna have our own conference and it's gonna be all Native. And I think things like that, like looking up to them, and same with like my mom and my grandma, it was like people would come over to the house, and you fed them, you offered them, you were not like in a like a subservient way, but in more of like a service way. Like, let's sit down and let's visit, and you're welcome here, and just being kind. I think being kind to people, and my grandma always used to have all kinds of people over for Thanksgiving, and just wanting to be a place for people to come and be able to be themselves, I think. Um, yeah, so now that I have kids, I look back and really think about those things, and even that support of, like, if somebody had something going on, and maybe it was their work or in a volunteer position, like, it wasn't just going to be like my mom or my dad. It was like our whole family was in support of it, whether we really knew it or not. It wasn't like an intentional decision. It was just like, oh well, we stand behind them, we help them. I remember being a little kid and like licking stamps for some like election, and like I didn't know at the time, like, oh yeah, I've done election work before, but just remember mainly the taste in my mouth, which was not great, but just kind of having those memories. I think, like, it was more of like, this is just what you do. You serve your community, you take care of one another. And so it's cool to hear, like, kind of how that all kind of threads in the work that we do now. What about, we kind of talked about this too. Maybe, Lynette, I'll start with you, because you were talking about learning, being raised by elders, and how just vital that was to you as a person, and in the work that you do. Can you share a little bit more about Indigenous cultural values, and how you incorporate that into your work, and how impactful that is? How does that impact the work that you're doing? What makes it so special, and why is it so important having those cultural values with you?
Well, for us, oh, okay. Had to make sure that I wasn't on mute again. Yeah, for me and for the work that we do, it's a way of life. We call them our values, and even fancier words like your theory of change, all of that, but it's really just a way of life that we incorporate. And I feel like today so many organizations are lacking those cultural values, and the organizational culture is really critical in how you're going to operate your organization. And if you don't have those and you're not embodying them as a leader, as like, and sharing that with the employees or with all of the team, they're not going to know what those values are. And so I feel like that is so crucial. And for us, it's all based, on our circular way of life, where everybody is a part of the circle. Everybody brings a gift. Everybody, they all have a gift to give. And some people, their strengths are, in accounting. Some are in the art program. Some are in food sovereignty. Some are, and when everybody are operating with these values, they come together, and that's what makes the circle strong, and that's what empowers the circle. And so our circular way is, we say it's spirit based, it's holistic, where everything is connected within ourselves. It starts with self, and creator, or whatever you want to call that, the universe, Wakantanka, Maheo, whatever your words are, is for that universal powerful energy that is in all things, that are in the trees, even the rocks, where this concept, it's hard for people that are not connected to their own spirit to understand that even rocks have a spirit. Even the grandfather rocks are alive. And when we go into our sweat lodges, that's what we take in there and to purify ourselves. And we acknowledge them that they're grandfathers, they're old, they've been here, since the beginning of time. And so everything has a spirit. And all the work that we do is a spirit and is an energy. So that circular concept, the holistic concept, and mind, body, spirit is all connected. And so all of the, within that circle, there is no beginning and there is no end. It's like a continuation of life and the continuation of, all the stages of life too. And so the work that we do, it includes all stages, our infant, child, adolescent, adult, elder. And those two child and elder, they're like most important in our culture because our children represent the future and our elders represent the knowledge and wisdom, that is to be passed to the future generation. So through our work, that is at the center of everything that we do, and passing of intergenerational knowledge and wisdom. And so, all of that, it all comes together and it makes the circle strong. And even within that, I mean, I do trainings on all of this. I could talk forever on this, but I know we're short on time. So um but that's just like an overview. And you have those concentric circles of, even when we pray, we acknowledge, like the inner circle, and we acknowledge our children, our family, and our extended family, and then our community, and then our nations, so we acknowledge all of that, but it starts with self here. So how we live our lives, the example that we are showing to our team members at work or to our stakeholders, our people that we serve. What kind of example are you living? So that is really, really important. And there's a lot more to it, but those values come into play. We have our values of, humility, generosity, courage, even fortitude. My grandmother told me fortitude is not the same as courage. Fortitude means that you are willing to sacrifice for what you believe in. And so those are all big parts of, our work and the values that guide us. And generosity, I think I shared that. Wisdom, is another part. Wisdom, we try to make wise choices and wise decisions and think about, what we're doing and who we're impacting and why we're doing this work. And so it all comes together. So I'll just share that much, about the values. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I really appreciate how a lot of I think in organizations like we all, there's like the mission and the vision statement, but a lot of times it's kind of like outward about like the work we're doing in the community or whatever, change we're trying to create. And I think what you're talking about, the wisdom that you shared, just kind of reminds me of a lot of other native orgs that are like we embody that. It's almost like practice what you preach, but more deep. It's like our staff, and so you're modeling that within your organization and within the community, and just kind of that ripple effect and how just how impactful that is. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
What about you, Angie? How are you incorporating cultural values into your work, and why is that so important?
Well, like Lynette, I was raised by my grandparents too. And they spoke Grovant, all the time. Like, Indian music. Grandma played Indian records all the time. We even had a parakeet that danced across its perch whenever the Indian music was playing. And then, we had matching dance outfits. I mean, so I think, I got a lot of the cultural and the values too from my grandparents. And but I think that, the biggest thing I got, especially from my grandpa, was humble. They were just really humble people. And I think I get that from them, because when you work in Indian communities, and there's such a mistrust of financial institutions, that and so when you start working with individuals who are in those positions of not having trust, then you have to be humble in the way that you work with them. You have to understand where they come from. And I think too, what helps is my staff is 99% Native American. I'm really, really fortunate to be able to have Native Americans who are in the finance world working for me, because when individuals come into the office, I mean, they can relate, easily with the people that work for me, because they're all Native American. And so I think, but we do support, the culture, and the way we work with individuals. I mean, we start our meetings off with a prayer, and um, and and I think that there's two actually programs too that we're working with to try to help individuals in our communities. One is called the Yellowbird Fellowship Program, and that fellowship program we're helping to we developed a curriculum to help individuals in our communities that are interested in careers in finance. So we developed the curriculum and we're piloting it, right now, because I don't, there's not a whole lot of Native Americans in the finance industry, whether it be with Native CDFIs or whether it be with mainstream financial institutions, or even school districts with, finance officers. So we're piloting that program, right now. And in the pilot phase, of course, we're going to be, getting input to see how we can really finesse the curriculum in order to, just make it better. And so we hope, and this actually is being done we're part of the Mountain Plains Native CDFI Coalition. And so we received funding from EDA, the Build Back Better program, to be able to do this. And so we do have the curriculum. We're piloting it, and hopefully in the second year, we're going to be able to recruit from our own communities individuals who are interested in going through the fellowship program, because we do have wraparound support. And then also we're working with some banks and other Native CDFIs for, field experience. And so hopefully we'll be able to place these individuals in careers that are going to, to help them. And so, and then we do have too, when you work in the finance world, we have individuals that come into our office and we help them to clear up their credit. And all of a sudden, they get all these credit cards, or they have a something personal come up, or they lose their jobs. So they get caught into this cycle, and this cycle, it doesn't help them, to get out of like if you have a loan, and it doesn't help them to get out of that cycle. So we developed a trauma care toolkit, and this toolkit is actually it's unique because what we're doing is we're going way back, to being placed on reservations, boarding schools, relocation. We did an assessment, and so part of that assessment assesses all of those events that took place, and why we're on, placed on reservations, because I think that a lot of our younger people, they don't really, not really taught all of uh, those 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 things that happen to be placed on reservations, and why there's a lot of trauma and poverty. And so with this toolkit, we're able to work with them and help them to get over this cycle of trauma that they have when it's specific to money management. We're not trying to cure, the social ills of our communities. We're just trying to help individuals understand how to, manage their money better. And all of those, have cultural value to them, because we have to have a way, to relate, and a way to teach them that, that actually they've never had the opportunity to learn before. And so yeah, I think that everything we do, all the work we do, especially when it comes to money, has to have culture and values instilled into our work. So
Yeah, and as I listen to both of you speak, I kind of it's like, just like you were saying, Lynette, like it's more of a way of life. It's almost, I always say, because I do cultural safety trainings in clinics and like labor and delivery units or organizations that are serving Native families. And it's kind of I always say, like, explaining culture to folks sometimes is like a fish trying to explain water, but when it's like your way of life, it's just how you would do things, right? Like, oh, this is just what we do. We don't even really have to think about it. But when we're the ones in leadership, and we're the ones like calling the shots, and we get to bring that part of us. And I think in thinking of like people who I think of in this kind of space, especially in the birthwork space with Indigenous communities, it's always been like no, this is just how we do it. Like, we don't ask permission. We don't, we just get to be who we are, and our values come with that, and they show up in the work that we do. And you don't even think about it being different until or unless you were in a situation, or you worked for another group or whatever, where you didn't get to do things the way we normally would, and we had to like assimilate. Or I think now, when you have like non-native people at your meetings or whatever, it reminded me when Angie was talking about just things like praying before meetings, or having food there. That's just something that you would always do. But then when non-native people are there, they're like, I remember after this one meeting just this summer, there was a native or a non-native guy. He worked for the state, and he just said, I just have to say, like, I appreciate how I love coming to these meetings, because it's so intentional. Like, it's not just work for a lot of us. Like, it's just what we do, and how we're a way of life, I feel like. So just really appreciate all what you both are saying. So one of the kind of last parts, they're just talking about some of the challenges, or opportunities to strengthen Indigenous women leaderships, and so our Indigenous women leadership. And so I'm wondering, like, in the work that you are doing, how are you seeing the space for Indigenous women leading this type of work? Like, how are you seeing that change? How is it yeah, what are you seeing in this kind of evolution of Native women leaders, and kind of being at more of these tables? I guess that's how I see it anyway. Maybe you all see it differently. Go ahead, Lynette. We'll start with you.
Let me gather my thoughts together. Well, I feel that, with the work that we do, And I feel nonprofit work in general is just, you see women leaders doing the work, you know. If you have, I attended like numerous in the state of Montana, gatherings and trainings where they brought all the nonprofit leaders together, and you see the majority are women. And some of it goes back to, those are just our gifts. You know, Creator blessed us with, as women, the ability to do many things. You know, we can call it multitasking because we're mothers, because we're, you know, and today we're working, we're doing all these things and we're managing. We're able to, you know, it's part of how how we're made up. You know, we can go to the left brain, right brain, back and forth like this. And that's why we're able to multitask and do this. And for men, you know, they're either in their left brain, they stop, and then they got to go to their right brain. And you know, they're made that way for a reason. We're made this way for a reason. Like we all have our gifts and our strengths, and we all bring that. And so I feel like the nonprofit work, or in this work, we're good organizers, we're good managers. And I see that time and time again. And I feel like, you know, with I see that in the communities and with our work, you know, where, and especially with Indigenous women, like we've gone through a lot. We've gone through a lot. The trauma that our people have experienced. And as women, we did not have, you know, we had to keep going because we're mothers, because we're life givers. So we had to adapt, and we had to shift, and we had to keep going. And I feel like that's the strength that we have. You know, we're able to do that. And we're able to adapt to changing times. And a lot of our work, you know, we do this one program, and it's called Reclaiming Our Sacredness. And it's really about reconnecting to our strengths as women and reclaiming, you know, our self-esteem. And I loved it when Angie was talking about seeing the self-esteem of women when their credit scores went up, and when they were able to buy their first car on their own, and all of those things. You know, that's really what reclaiming our sacredness is about, reclaiming ourselves and reconnecting to our gifts, and living from that, and even reclaiming the values and reclaiming our voice, because so many times we're told that, you know, we don't have a voice. And unfortunately, you know, we see in some of our circles today where in some of our communities where it almost feels like it's going backwards, where women are being silenced, or trying to be silenced again, but like the patriarchy is really seeping in, and that's not part of our culture. And I feel like, you know, cultures evolve, cultures shift, but the values remain the same, and women's voices have always been valued. And, you know, even with the men, like they would always go to the women, they would go to their grandmothers. If you see a man standing out, you know, these are part of our teachings. If you see someone that is uplifted, a man, you see all the women that are there with him, that are a part of that. And so, you know, we need to reclaim our voices. We need to reclaim our sacredness. And through our work, you know, we do that. We do that with all the young women that we work with. And it's not just, and we do this in a way where we're all part of the circle of life. it's not like we're better but we see our value and we know what our gifts are. And, male or, however people identify, they have their own gifts too. So when we can all come together and value ourselves and value each other, again, back to that's what makes a circle strong. And so, in all of our programs, that's what we do, like our food sovereignty. It's so crucial, because the mindset that we bring and what we, just like I'm still harvesting a buffalo. We had a buffalo harvest last week, and we did everything ourselves. And to see the young women um, step up and harvest that buffalo and take the hide off and cut it down and debone it and to I'm still doing that. Like I may be the executive director, but I love that work too. I love being on the ground with the people, and that is all a part of leadership, and that's really I'm setting the example for the younger generations too, that we're willing to do what we need to do to get the work done and to help each other and to uplift each other and to reclaim our sacredness. Yeah.
I love that. Or yeah, it's just like there's more in the nonprofit world, right? Like that's kind of being more valued, right? Like it's more of like people are starting to see more the value in that, as far as even like getting the deliverables done, but this is how it's done. And so I think more investing in that has been helpful, but you could always use more. Angie, would you like to share a little bit? I know we're getting low on time, but just a little anything about how you're seeing this space in Indigenous women's leadership in the nonprofit world, how you're seeing that change?
Yeah, I mean, as traditional, caretakers, I think that, we step into that role almost naturally. And, my staff, they're um I think they're 90% right now, Native American women. And actually, it's the women, my women lenders, that identified that, we're having, this trauma happening, with our clients, and that we needed to, do something. And I think that, because they are women, they are caretakers of their own family, that they were able to identify that, something's going on here. We got to do something about it. And so, and then too, and even the native CDFI world that I work in, um, 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 we're part of that Mountain Plains Native CDFI coalition, that I told you about. I think there's eight of us that are members of the coalition, and there's only one male. The rest are all women. And so, and for women to, be stepping into the finance world too, I mean, that's, it's always been dominated by non-native, um, you know, uh, men. And so to have this camaraderie ship with and working with women, I mean, I think there's things that we identify ourselves that that probably only women can do. And so I think that's a lot of why we're able to offer a lot of training, technical assistance, and especially the counseling part is because we can we have to do a lot of hand holding in this business. And so I think that with my Native American or my Native women staff, our Native women staff and other Native CDFIs, I think that's probably a reason too that a lot of them are and I'm going to step out there and say this. I think that's a lot of the reason why they're so successful is because they're led by women who can identify with the communities and be a lot more sensitive, I guess, to the needs of our clients. So
Yeah, I love that. It's like the needs overall, right? Like, what does this community need? But even in that moment, like, what does somebody need? And I think, like, that love and that nurturing. I mean, I always love like, that feeling when you're, I don't know if this is gonna, but like when you're getting like kind of chewed out by an auntie or something, right? Like it's like that love where someone you might be having like a stern talking to or somebody like telling you like it is, but they're doing that because out of love and they're trying to teach you. And so I always like getting a little like nudge from one of my aunties when I'm back home or, saying something. And that's just, yeah, that's what it reminds me of is like they're gonna here's what you need to do, but in a loving way. And so it's been such an honor to hear from you. I think what I hear overall is, in our conversations is that, you know, that we have the solutions in our community. I don't ever really hear a lot of Native women saying like, oh, well, I don't know what to do. Or, if they do, are kind of just being humble, or maybe they don't want to tell you their plan. But for the most part, we know what needs to happen and we know what to do to get it done. It's just a matter of being resourced and having that support. So just thank you guys for sharing so much of your work and of who you are as people. It's been such an honor. Kylie, I know you have a few words before we close out, so just want to pass it back to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Amy, Angie, and Lynette. Kristen, if you want to put up the slide with the QR codes. It's so clear that we just barely scratched the surface of how Indigenous women in Montana are carrying out truly some of the most complex, impactful, loving work that is happening in our communities. And the Women's Foundation is so proud to be able to support these leaders and these organizations. This is really a journey for us. I think that we are on a journey to really challenge ourselves to not fund Indigenous women as a special initiative, but as a core to gender equity and community well-being and systems change in Montana. And hopefully with a lot more learning and action to come from us. So I'd like you to join us, invite you to join us and mark this month, next month with Strength and Solidarity by making a donation to one of the organizations that was speaking today. So Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies, the Native American Initiatives portion of that, NACDC Financial Services, and or Yellowbird Lifeway Center. So you can access those on the QR code. I'll send out a follow-up email. And then on the next slide is all of the Indigenous-led organizations that the Women's Foundation funds. We really believe that elevating Indigenous women's leadership is essential to gender equity work in Montana. And we're just so proud to be learning from and supporting leaders like Amy, Angie, and Lynette. So with that, thank you for joining us and have a wonderful rest of your day.